I was sitting in the back of the conference room when Seren Fallon's boss slid his hand onto her knee under the table. She didn't pull away. She leaned closer and whispered that I should go home because the meeting would run late. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I watched his hand. I memorized the time. Then I walked out, got in my car, and made one phone call that started a chain reaction he didn't see coming. My name is Cedric Fallon, and I've been underestimated my entire career. 42 years old, ex-military cybersecurity specialist turned corporate drone at Trasker Holdings. The kind of guy who fixes your computer problems and gets forgotten 5 minutes later. That's exactly how I like it. Invisible means access. Access means power. And power, well, that's something people like Marlo Trasker never see coming from people like me. The conference room was all glass and chrome, typical Dallas corporate theater. Marlo Trasker, 52 years old and worth more money than most small countries, sat at the head of the mahogany table like he owned the world. Which, technically, he did own a decent chunk of it. His teeth were so white they could guide ships to shore, and his smile had that predatory gleam that rich men perfect around the time they buy their third yacht. Seren sat 3 seats down from him, wearing that navy blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a way that showed off her neck, and she had that focused expression she wore when she was hunting for her next promotion. I'd seen that look before. I just never thought it would be aimed at someone else's lap. The quarterly projections show significant growth in the Southeast Division, Marlo was saying, his fingers drumming against the table. Except they weren't drumming on the table. They were drumming on my wife's knee. Seren's team has exceeded expectations across all metrics. She smiled at him. Not the polite, professional smile she gave other executives. This was different, warmer, more intimate. The kind of smile that said, "Thank you for more than just the compliment." "We've worked very closely together," she said, and her voice had that throaty quality it got when she was pleased about something. Marlo has been incredibly hands-on with the project. I bet he has, I thought. My military training kicked in automatically. Observe, assess, plan. Marlo's wedding ring was conspicuously absent. Seren was wearing hers, but she kept twisting it with her thumb. Nervous habit she'd developed recently. The pieces were falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle made of broken glass. The meeting droned on for another 20 minutes. Budget allocations, market analysis, corporate buzzwords that meant nothing and everything depending on who was saying them. I watched Marlo's hand stay exactly where it was. I watched Seren not move away. I watched her laugh at his jokes that weren't funny and nod at his insights that weren't insightful. When the meeting finally ended, Seren turned to me with that same professional smile. "Cedric, maybe you should head home. This is going to run much later than expected. Marlo and I need to go over some sensitive details about the expansion." Sensitive details. Right. "Sure thing," I said, standing up and gathering my laptop. "I'll see you when you get home." "Don't wait up," Marlo said, not even looking at me. "These strategy sessions can go well past midnight." I nodded like the dutiful, clueless husband and walked out of that conference room. But I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I took the elevator down to the parking garage and sat in my car for exactly 3 minutes, watching the building's security feeds on my phone. Corporate cybersecurity has its perks. At 3:47 p.m., Seren and Marlo left the conference room together. At 3:52 p.m., they entered his private elevator. At 4:15 p.m., they exited together on the executive floor, where Marlo kept his private suite. The same suite where he entertained major clients and, apparently, ambitious employees. That's when I made the phone call. "Lexi, it's Cedric. I need that favor we talked about, the big one." Lexi Grant had been my friend since I started at Trasker Holdings 5 years ago. She worked in HR, which meant she had access to everything that mattered: personnel files, expense reports, travel bookings, disciplinary actions. More importantly, She owed me a favor from when I'd helped her expose her ex-husband's embezzlement scheme at his law firm. "How big are we talking?" she asked. "Nuclear," I said. "I need everything you can pull on Marlo Trasker and Seren Fallon. Financial records, travel expenses, calendar synchronization, badge access logs, anything that shows a pattern." There was a pause. "Cedric, what's going on?" "Something I should have seen coming months ago. Can you do it?" "Give me 2 hours. I'll send everything to your secure drive." I drove home to our suburban house in Plano, the one with the white picket fence and the perfectly manicured lawn that screamed middle-class success. The same house where Seren and I had planned our future, talked about kids, dreamed about growing old together. Funny how dreams can turn into evidence. By 7 p.m., I had everything I needed. Lexi had outdone herself. Hotel charges on Marlo's corporate card dating back 8 months. Conference rooms booked for private strategy sessions that lasted 3 and 4 hours. Badge logs showing Seren accessing the executive floor at times when she had no official business there. Calendar entries that synchronized perfectly between their phones, including weekend work sessions at luxury resorts. The smoking gun was in the expense reports. Marlo had been paying for everything: her meals, her travel, even her dry cleaning. All of it carefully disguised as legitimate business expenses, but the pattern was clear as daylight to anyone who knew how to look. But the real treasure was in the voice messages. Seren had been using our shared cloud storage for work files, which meant I had access to everything she uploaded, including the voice messages she'd been sending to Marlo's private number. Messages where she talked about their special relationship and how she was so grateful for everything he was doing for her career. Messages where she laughed about how easy it was to manage expectations at home while she focused on more important opportunities. I sat in my home office until midnight, building my case like I used to build intelligence reports in the Army. Every piece of evidence cross-referenced and verified, every timeline confirmed, every digital footprint documented. Seren came home at 12:47 a.m., smelling like expensive cologne and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How was the strategy session?" I asked from the couch. "Productive," she said, not meeting my gaze. "Marlo really knows how to push for results." "I bet he does." She went upstairs to shower, and I went back to my computer. By 2 a.m., I had filed an anonymous compliance report through the company's ethics portal, using Marlo's own login credentials from a terminal he'd forgotten to log out of earlier that day. The report detailed every expense, every timeline discrepancy, every policy violation I'd uncovered. But that was just the beginning. At 6 a.m. sharp, my phone buzzed with a text from Lexi. "Holy hell, Cedric. Marlo's accounts are frozen. Emergency board meeting in an hour. What did you do?" I was making coffee when Seren came downstairs, humming some tune I didn't recognize. She was wearing her lucky red dress, the one she saved for important presentations and special occasions. Her mood was almost giddy. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself orange juice. "Couldn't sleep. Weird dreams." She laughed, checking her phone. "Well, I might be home early today. Marlo mentioned something about taking the afternoon off to celebrate the successful strategy session." That's when her phone rang. I watched her face change from confident to confused to panicked in the span of 30 seconds. "What do you mean suspended?" she said into the phone. "What compliance report?" I sipped my coffee and watched my wife's world start to crumble. The conversation lasted 10 minutes, with Seren's voice getting higher and more frantic with each exchange. When she finally hung up, her hands were shaking. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding," she said, more to herself than to me. "Someone filed a false report about Marlo. Corporate is investigating." "That's terrible," I said. "I'm sure it'll all get sorted out." She rushed out of the house without breakfast, without her usual goodbye kiss, without even looking back. I gave her a 30-minute head start, then drove to the office myself. The Trasker Holdings building was buzzing with gossip. Marlowe's suspension had sent shock waves through the executive floors, and everyone was speculating about what had happened. I kept my head down and went to my cubicle, just another invisible IT guy watching the chaos unfold. At 10 a.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Fallon? This is Janet Morrison from Morrison, Burke & Associates. I represent your wife in a legal matter. We need to schedule an emergency hearing regarding your marital assets and living arrangements." "I'm sorry, what?" "Your wife has filed for emergency protective orders due to alleged domestic instability. We'll need you to appear in court tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I hung up and stared at my computer screen. Seren wasn't just panicking, she was counterattacking, and she was moving fast. By noon, I had been served with papers at my office: emergency restraining order, citing emotional distress and financial manipulation, temporary injunction freezing our joint accounts, motion for immediate possession of our marital home. She was trying to lock me out of my own life before I could react. The papers claimed I had been exhibiting increasingly erratic and controlling behavior, and that she feared for her emotional and financial safety. She'd even included statements from witnesses, including my own brother Tyler, claiming I had made threatening remarks about her career and their relationship. Tyler. That hurt more than I expected. My younger brother had been struggling with his real estate business for months, behind on his mortgage and facing bankruptcy. Apparently, Seren had offered him a lifeline in exchange for his cooperation, but Seren had made one critical mistake. She'd filed these papers before she knew about the prenuptial agreement addendum. See, when we'd gotten married 5 years ago, we'd signed a standard prenup at her insistence. She'd been making more money than me at the time, and she wanted to protect her assets. Fair enough. But what she didn't know was that I'd had my lawyer add a specific clause about infidelity and financial misconduct, a clause that became active if either party engaged in extramarital relationships or used marital assets for personal gain outside the marriage. Seren had never read the full document. She'd signed where her lawyer told her to sign and forgotten about it. I called my attorney, David Chen, and had him file our response. Not just a denial of her claims, but a full countersuit citing the prenup addendum and including every piece of evidence I'd gathered. Hotel receipts, badge logs, voice messages, expense reports, everything. "Are you sure you want to go nuclear?" David asked. "She fired first," I said. "I'm just returning the favor." The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. Seren was already there with her legal team, looking confident and composed. She'd dressed conservatively, playing the role of the wronged wife perfectly. Tyler sat behind her, avoiding my eyes. When the judge called our case, Seren's lawyer stood up and began painting me as an unstable, controlling husband who had become obsessed with destroying his wife's career out of jealousy and spite. "Your Honor, Mr. Fallon has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior, including surveillance of his wife's workplace activities and making threatening statements about her professional relationships. Mrs. Fallon fears for her safety and requests immediate protective measures." Tyler took the stand and repeated the story they'd rehearsed. How I'd been acting strange lately, making comments about Serene's boss, talking about teaching people lessons. How I'd seemed angry and unpredictable. It was a good performance, almost believable. Then David stood up and handed the judge a thick folder. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Fallon has been engaged in an extramarital affair with her supervisor, using marital assets and company resources to facilitate this relationship. We also have evidence that her claims of domestic instability are fabricated as part of an attempt to circumvent the prenuptial agreement she signed." The judge reviewed the documents for 20 minutes, while the courtroom sat in complete silence. I watched Seren's face go from confident to confused to terrified as the evidence mounted. "Mrs. Fallon," the judge finally said, "are these voice recordings authentic?" Seren's lawyer whispered frantically in her ear. "Your Honor, we need time to review these materials." The voice analysis was completed by the same firm used by the Dallas Police Department. David said. The recordings are authentic and unaltered. The judge listened to 3 of the voice messages, including the one where Seren laughed about managing expectations at home, while she pursued better opportunities with Marlowe. Motion for emergency protective orders is denied, the judge announced. Furthermore, this court finds evidence of potential perjury in the initial filing. Mrs. Fallon, you and your witnesses may face additional legal consequences. Seren's case collapsed in real time. The restraining order was dismissed. The asset freeze was lifted. Tyler's testimony was exposed as fabricated, and the prenup addendum became active immediately. As we left the courthouse, Seren grabbed my arm. "Cedric, we can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. The woman I'd married was still there, buried under layers of ambition and betrayal, but she was there. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been regret. Then I remembered Marlowe's hand on her knee, her smile when she told me to go home, the voice messages where she laughed about our marriage. "Yes, it does," I said, and walked away. Seren didn't give up. I should have known she wouldn't. She'd spent her entire career fighting for every promotion, every opportunity, every advantage. Losing wasn't in her vocabulary. She started with my family. My mother called me 3 days after the courthouse disaster, her voice tight with concern. "Cedric, honey, Seren came by yesterday. She's very upset. She says you've been having some kind of breakdown." "Mom, that's not..." She showed me pictures of bruises on her arms. "She says you've been drinking and getting angry about her work. She's worried about you." I closed my eyes. Seren was playing the long game, building a narrative of me as an abusive husband who'd snapped when confronted with his wife's success. The bruises were probably makeup, but they'd look real enough in photographs. "Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Seren has been having an affair with her boss. I have proof. She's trying to manipulate you because her legal case fell apart." There was a long pause. "Cedric, that doesn't sound like the Seren I know." "The Seren you know doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did." I spent the next hour on the phone with my parents, explaining everything. The evidence, the court case, the prenup addendum. By the end of the conversation, they understood what was really happening. But the damage was done. Seren had planted seeds of doubt that would take time to fully uproot. She tried the same strategy with our friends, our neighbors, even my coworkers. Everywhere I went, I could see the questions in people's eyes. Was Cedric really the stable, reliable guy they thought they knew? Or was there something darker underneath? But Seren made one crucial mistake. She underestimated how thoroughly I'd documented everything. On Thursday morning, I executed the prenup addendum. The house, which we'd bought together but was titled in my name due to my better credit score, reverted to my sole ownership. Seren's claim to half the equity vanished. The joint savings account, which contained mostly money from my military pension and IT consulting work, became mine alone. Her car, which was leased under my name for insurance purposes, was repossessed. Most importantly, her settlement rights disappeared. Instead of walking away with half our assets, she was entitled to exactly what she'd brought into the marriage 5 years ago: her personal belongings and about $12,000 in a savings account she'd forgotten existed. I had the locks changed while she was at work. When she came home that evening, she found her belongings packed neatly in boxes on the front porch, along with a copy of the executed prenup addendum and a formal eviction notice. She stood on the sidewalk for 20 minutes, calling my phone and pounding on the door. I watched through the security cameras I'd installed the day before. She looked smaller somehow, less formidable than the confident executive who dismissed me from that conference room. Finally, she picked up one of the boxes and walked to her car. A Honda Civic she'd borrowed from her sister since her BMW was now sitting in a repo lot somewhere. But Seren still had one card left to play: her relationship with Marlowe. Even though he'd been terminated from Trasker Holdings, Marlowe still had connections. board members at other companies, investors, politicians who owed him favors. If he could land somewhere else, he could bring Seren with him. They could start over, rebuild their careers, and leave the wreckage of my marriage behind. That's when I decided to make sure Marlo Trasker never worked in Dallas again. I'd been saving the best evidence for last. While digging through the expense reports, I'd found something interesting. A pattern of payments to shell companies that didn't seem to provide any actual services. Consulting fees, marketing expenses, technology upgrades, all paid to businesses that existed only on paper. Marlo had been embezzling from Trasker Holdings for at least 3 years, using fake vendors to funnel money into offshore accounts. The amounts weren't huge, $50,000 here, $30,000 there, but they added up to over $2 million. I compiled everything into a comprehensive report and sent it to Jonas Creel, the old-school board member who'd never liked Marlo's flashy management style. I also sent copies to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service, and the Dallas Business Journal. The story broke on Friday morning. Former Trasker Holdings CEO under investigation for embezzlement and securities fraud. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. By noon, Marlo's face was on every business news channel in Texas. By evening, 3 other companies had quietly withdrawn job offers they'd extended to him. By Monday, he was hiring criminal defense attorneys instead of headhunters. Seren called me that night, her voice barely above a whisper. "You destroyed him." "He destroyed himself. I just provided the documentation." "What about me? What am I supposed to do now?" I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You're smart, Seren. You'll figure something out. You always do." "Cedric, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems. It doesn't have to end like this." For a moment, I imagined what that might look like. Serene and me, sitting in some therapist's office, talking through our feelings like civilized adults. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. Maybe we could rebuild what we'd lost. Then I remembered the voice message where she'd called me manageable and laughed about how easy it was to keep me distracted while she pursued real opportunities. "It ended the moment you put your hand on his knee and didn't pull away," I said. "Everything after that was just paperwork." I hung up and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The house felt different now, bigger, quieter, more like mine. I'd won, completely and decisively. Serene was broke, homeless, and unemployable in Dallas. Marlo was facing federal charges. Tyler was dealing with his own legal problems for perjury. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated, triumphant. Instead, I felt empty. I thought it was over. I really did. Serene had moved back in with her sister in Fort Worth. Marlo was too busy with lawyers to cause trouble. Tyler had stopped returning my calls, which was fine by me. The immediate threat had passed, and I could get back to my quiet life as an invisible IT guy. Then Marlo decided he wasn't going down without a fight. It started with small things. My credit cards getting mysteriously canceled. My internet service being interrupted for maintenance that never seemed to get completed. My car getting keyed in the company parking garage. Nothing I could prove, but the pattern was clear. Marlo was using what remained of his network to make my life difficult. A word here, a favor there, just enough pressure to let me know he was still dangerous. The escalation came on a Tuesday night in October. I was working late at the office, finishing up a security audit that should have been completed weeks earlier. The building was mostly empty, just a few dedicated workaholics and the cleaning crew. I was packing up my laptop when the elevator dinged. 3 men stepped out. Not employees. I knew everyone who worked late, and these guys definitely weren't from accounting. They were big, well-dressed, and walking with the kind of purposeful stride that meant trouble. "Cedric Fallon?" the lead guy asked. He had a shaved head and the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Depends who's asking. We represent a mutual friend. He'd like to have a conversation with you. I glanced around the office. The security cameras were recording, but that wouldn't help me if these guys decided to get physical. The nearest exit was 20 feet away, past all three of them. Tell our mutual friend that my calendar is pretty full this month. Maybe we can schedule something for next year. The lead guy's smile got wider. I don't think you understand. This isn't a request. That's when I noticed the slight bulge under his jacket. These weren't just intimidation specialists. They were armed. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd cornered me in my own territory. Gentlemen, I said, reaching slowly for my laptop bag, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I pulled out what looked like a standard IT remote, the kind of device tech guys use to control projectors and conference room equipment, except this one had been modified with a few extra features. I pressed a button, and every electronic lock in the building engaged simultaneously. Emergency protocols activated, sealing the exits and triggering a silent alarm at the security company. The elevators stopped working. The lights dimmed to emergency levels. "What the hell did you do?" one of the guys demanded. "Lockdown protocol," I said calmly. "In case of security threats, the building automatically seals to prevent unauthorized access or egress. The police should be here in about 8 minutes." The lead guy reached for his jacket, but I was already moving. 20 years of military training doesn't just disappear because you become a corporate drone. I hit him with my laptop bag, using the weight of the computer to catch him off balance, then swept his legs while he was stumbling. The other two rushed me, but they were operating in an unfamiliar environment while I knew every inch of this office. I led them on a chase through the cubicles, using my knowledge of the layout to stay ahead, while the building's security system worked against them. By the time the police arrived, all three men were sitting in the lobby with their hands zip-tied behind their backs, courtesy of the cable management supplies I kept in my desk drawer. "How did you know they were coming?" the lead detective asked while taking my statement. I didn't, but I've been expecting something like this for a while. When you embarrass powerful people, they tend to push back. The three men weren't talking, but their phones told the story. Text messages from a number registered to one of Marlowe's shell companies, photos of my car and home address, detailed instructions about sending a message without permanent damage. Marlowe had been careful not to directly incriminate himself, but the digital trail was clear enough. He'd hired muscle to intimidate me, probably hoping I'd back down and stop cooperating with the federal investigation. Instead, he just handed me more ammunition. I forwarded all the evidence to the FBI agents handling Marlowe's embezzlement case. Witness intimidation was a federal crime, and it carried serious penalties. Within 48 hours, Marlowe was arrested again, this time with no possibility of bail. But the real satisfaction came from what happened next. See, Marlowe's hired muscle had been sloppy about operational security. Their phones contained contact information for dozens of other clients, politicians, business executives, anyone who needed problems to disappear quietly. The FBI seized everything, turning a simple embezzlement case into a massive corruption investigation. Marlowe's attempt to intimidate me had accidentally exposed an entire network of corporate crime and political corruption. He'd gone from facing 5 years for embezzlement to potentially spending the rest of his life in federal prison. I should have been satisfied. The man who'd destroyed my marriage was facing justice, and I was safe from retaliation. But Seren still wasn't finished with me. She'd been quiet since Marlowe's arrest, laying low and trying to rebuild her life. But losing her meal ticket had made her desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. The call came on a Friday afternoon. Tyler's voice, shaky and scared. "Cedric, I need help. Serene's lost it. She's talking about framing you for assault, making it look like you attacked her. She's got bruises, fake witnesses, the whole thing planned out." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of lying, and because she's not just going after you anymore. She wants me to say you threatened Mom and Dad too. I can't do that, man. I won't. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Going after me was one thing, but involving our parents crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Where is she now? Her sister's place. But Cedric, she's not thinking straight. She's talking about making you pay for ruining her life. I think she might actually try to hurt you. I hung up and stared out my office window at the Dallas skyline. Somewhere out there, my ex-wife was planning to destroy what was left of my reputation and possibly my freedom. She'd already lost everything: her career, her money, her future with Marlo. She had nothing left to lose, which made her more dangerous than ever. But she'd forgotten one important detail. I'd been planning for this possibility since the day I filed that first compliance report. Every conversation recorded, every interaction documented, every move anticipated and countered. Seren thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The setup was almost perfect. I had to admire Serene's attention to detail, even as I prepared to dismantle it piece by piece. She'd rented a cheap apartment in downtown Dallas, the kind of place with thin walls and neighbors who minded their own business. She documented a pattern of harassment over the past month: fake phone calls, manufactured evidence of stalking, even staged photographs that made it look like someone had been watching her building. The bruises were professional quality, probably done by a makeup artist she'd found online. Dark purple marks on her arms and neck that would photograph beautifully under courthouse lighting. She'd even messed up her hair and torn her clothing to sell the story. The plan was simple: lure me to her apartment under the pretense of wanting to reconcile, then claim I'd attacked her when she refused to get back together. Tyler would happen to arrive just in time to witness the aftermath, and 2 other neighbors would provide supporting testimony about hearing screams and violence. It would have worked on most people. Seren had always been good at reading people, understanding their weaknesses, exploiting their blind spots. She knew I still had feelings for her, despite everything that had happened. She was counting on those feelings to make me careless. But she'd made one critical error. She'd told Tyler the plan, and Tyler had told me. I spent 3 days preparing my counter-strategy. Security cameras hidden throughout her building, courtesy of a private investigator who owed me a favor. Audio recording equipment that would capture every word of our conversation. GPS tracking on my phone that would provide minute-by-minute documentation of my location. Most importantly, I arranged for Detective Sarah Martinez from the Dallas Police Department to be waiting nearby. Martinez had been the lead investigator on Marlo's intimidation case, and she was very interested in Serene's pattern of filing false reports. The call came on Wednesday evening, right on schedule. "Cedric, it's me. Can we talk? I mean really talk, not through lawyers or over the phone. I think we owe each other that much." Her voice was soft, vulnerable, with just a hint of the woman I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. If I hadn't known what she was planning, I might have actually believed her. "Where do you want to meet?" "My place. I know it's not much, but it's private. We can talk without worrying about who's listening." I almost laughed. The irony was too perfect. "Text me the address. I'll be there in an hour." I drove to her apartment building slowly, taking my time, making sure the GPS tracking was working perfectly. The private investigator confirmed that all the cameras were operational and that Detective Martinez was in position. Seren's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse, the kind of trendy loft space that looked expensive, but was actually just overpriced. She answered the door wearing jeans and a sweater, looking younger and more vulnerable than she had in months. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let me in. The apartment was small but nicely furnished. Too nicely furnished for someone who was supposedly broke and unemployed. I made a mental note to investigate where she'd gotten the money for all this. "You look good," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, Seren was still beautiful. "You too. I've missed you, Cedric. I know that sounds crazy after everything that's happened, but it's true. She gestured for me to sit on the couch, then sat across from me in a chair, close enough to seem intimate, far enough away to have room to stage her performance. I've been thinking about us a lot lately, she continued, about what went wrong, how we got to this point. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I kept my voice neutral, but I could feel the anger building. Is that what you call sleeping with your boss and trying to frame me for domestic violence? Her composure slipped for just a moment. I never meant for things to go so far with Marlowe. It started as just a professional relationship, but he was so charming, so powerful. I got caught up in the excitement of it all. And the false police reports, the fake bruises, was that just excitement too? Now she looked genuinely confused. What fake bruises? Cedric, I don't know what you're talking about. She was good, really good. If I hadn't known about her plan, I might have actually doubted what Tyler had told me. Seren, I know what you're planning. Tyler told me everything. Her face went through a fascinating series of expressions: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally resignation. That little weasel, she muttered. Then louder, okay, fine. You know, so what? You've already destroyed my life, my career, my future. What's left for you to take? Your freedom, if you go through with this. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. My freedom? Cedric, I'm living in a studio apartment that costs more per month than I make waiting tables. I'm 34 years old with a useless business degree and no references because my ex-husband decided to play detective. What kind of freedom is that? The kind where you're not in prison for filing false police reports and perjury. Prison? She stood up and started pacing. You think I'm afraid of prison? At least in prison I'd have 3 meals a day and free health care. That's when I realized how far gone she really was. The confident, ambitious woman I'd married had been replaced by someone desperate and dangerous. Someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose. Seren, it doesn't have to be like this. You're smart, talented, resourceful. You can rebuild your life somewhere else, start over fresh. With what money? What references? You made sure I'd never work in Dallas again, and news travels fast in our industry. I'm blacklisted everywhere that matters. She was right, and we both knew it. I'd been thorough in my revenge, maybe too thorough. I'd wanted to make sure she couldn't hurt anyone else the way she'd hurt me, but I'd also made it impossible for her to move on with her life. For a moment, I felt something that might have been guilt. Then she reached for the lamp on the side table and swung it at her own face. The sound was horrible, a wet crack as the ceramic base connected with her cheekbone. She stumbled backward, real pain mixing with the fake bruises, and I realized she was actually going to go through with it. Seren, stop! But she was already reaching for her phone, probably to call 911 and report that I'd attacked her. That's when Detective Martinez knocked on the door. Dallas Police! Open up! Seren froze, the phone halfway to her ear, understanding flooding her face as she realized she'd been caught. You recorded everything, she whispered. Everything, I confirmed. Martinez entered with 2 uniformed officers, surveying the scene. Seren, with her self-inflicted injury, me standing calmly by the window, the lamp broken on the floor. Ms. Fallon, you're under arrest for attempted filing of a false police report and conspiracy to commit perjury. As they handcuffed her, Seren looked at me with something that might have been respect. You really did think of everything, didn't you? I learned from the best, I said. You taught me never to underestimate an opponent. They led her away, and I was left alone in the apartment she'd rented with money I still couldn't account for. It would take the police weeks to unravel all of her schemes, but the important thing was that it was finally over. Or so I thought. I should have known it wasn't over. People like Seren don't give up. They just get more creative. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after Seren's arrest. My mother's voice, shaky and scared in a way I'd never heard before. Cedric, There are people here. They say they want to talk to you about Seren. They won't leave. I was out of bed and reaching for my clothes before she finished the sentence. Mom, where's Dad? They made him sit down in the living room. Cedric, I think one of them has a gun. I'm calling the police right now. Don't do anything to make them angry, okay? Just stay calm, and I'll be there in 20 minutes. They said if you call the police, they'll leave and come back later when you're not expecting them. They want to make a deal. I closed my eyes and forced myself to think clearly. My parents lived 40 minutes away in a quiet suburb where the most exciting crime was teenagers toilet papering houses on Halloween. They'd never been part of this war between Seren and me, and they didn't deserve to be dragged into it now. Put one of them on the phone. There was a shuffling sound, then a voice I didn't recognize. Male, calm, professional. Mr. Fallon, my name is David. I represent certain parties who have been adversely affected by your recent actions. We'd like to propose a mutually beneficial arrangement. What kind of arrangement? You drop all cooperation with federal investigators regarding Mr. Trasker's business activities. You also provide a written statement that your ex-wife was emotionally disturbed and not responsible for her recent legal troubles. In exchange, your parents remain safe and your ex-wife's legal problems disappear. I almost laughed. Even from jail, Seren was still playing chess, while everyone else played checkers. She'd somehow convinced Marlowe's remaining associates that I was the key to their boss's legal troubles, and she'd used that leverage to arrange her own rescue. And if I refuse, then your parents will have a very unfortunate accident, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing it was your fault. I sat in my bedroom for exactly 30 seconds, running through options. I could call the police, but that would just escalate the situation and put my parents in immediate danger. I could try to negotiate, but people who threaten elderly civilians aren't usually interested in reasonable compromises. Or I could give them exactly what they were asking for, just not in the way they expected. I grabbed my laptop and started making calls. Lexi first, then Detective Martinez, then the FBI agents handling Marlowe's case. By 3 a.m., I had a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both. I drove to my parents' house slowly, taking time to make sure all the pieces were in place. The FBI surveillance team was already positioned around the neighborhood, invisible, but ready. Detective Martinez was coordinating with SWAT from a command post 2 blocks away. My laptop was loaded with every piece of evidence I'd gathered over the past 6 months, ready to stream live to multiple law enforcement agencies. Most importantly, I'd activated the emergency protocol I'd built into my parents' home security system 6 months ago, right after Marlowe's first attempt at intimidation. My parents' house looked normal from the outside, a modest 2-story colonial with a well-maintained lawn and flower beds my mother tended religiously. But appearances were deceiving. I'd spent weeks installing hidden cameras, motion sensors, and other security measures throughout the property. If someone wanted to threaten my family, they'd have to do it on my terms. I parked in the driveway and walked to the front door. Before I could knock, it opened to reveal a man in his 40s wearing an expensive suit and a practiced smile. Mr. Fallon, thank you for coming. Your parents are fine, by the way. We're not monsters. Just kidding yourself if you think breaking into an elderly couple's home makes you anything other than a monster. He stepped aside to let me enter. The living room looked like a scene from a hostage movie, my parents sitting stiffly on the couch, 2 more men in suits standing nearby, everyone pretending this was a normal business meeting. Mom, Dad, are you okay? We're fine, honey, my mother said, but I could see the fear in her eyes. These men just want to talk. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I think it's time for everyone to stop talking. I pressed a button on my phone and every screen in the house came to life simultaneously. The TV, my father's computer, even the digital picture frames my mother loved, all of them started playing the same video feed. It was security footage from Seren's apartment, showing her hitting herself with the lamp and preparing to frame me for assault. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was the audio, where she clearly discussed her plan to have Marlowe's associates intimidate my parents if her legal case fell apart. Seren recorded everything, I announced to the room. Every conversation with Marlowe's people, every plan to threaten my family, every detail of the conspiracy. She was planning to sell you all out from the beginning. The lead guy, David, pulled out his phone and started making a call, but nothing happened. No signal. Cell phone jammers, I explained helpfully. Activated the moment you entered the property, along with door locks, window security, and a live video feed to the FBI field office downtown. That's when the floodlights came on outside, turning the quiet suburban street into a football stadium. Police cars appeared from every direction, SWAT teams took positions around the house, and helicopters circled overhead with searchlights. "Gentlemen," I said, "you're surrounded by approximately 50 federal agents and local police officers. Your boss is already in federal custody, your employer is facing racketeering charges, and your ex-partner just provided detailed testimony about this entire operation in exchange for a reduced sentence." David looked around the room, calculating odds and finding them all bad. "What do you want?" "I want you to walk outside with your hands up and surrender peacefully. I want my parents to be left alone forever. And I want Seren to serve every day of her sentence without any more schemes or escape attempts." "And in exchange?" "In exchange, I'll recommend that federal prosecutors consider cooperation agreements instead of maximum sentences. You'll do time, but you'll live to see the outside again." The next 10 minutes were surprisingly anticlimactic. David and his associates surrendered without resistance. My parents were checked by paramedics and found to be unharmed, and Detective Martinez arrested everyone involved in the conspiracy. As the last police car pulled away, I sat on my parents' front porch with my father, watching the sun come up over the suburban landscape. "Is it over?" he asked. "Yeah, Dad, it's over." "Good. Your mother was getting tired of all the excitement." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Seren was facing federal charges that would keep her in prison for years. Marlowe and his associates were looking at decades behind bars. Tyler was cooperating with prosecutors and would probably get probation in exchange for his testimony. The war was finally over, and I'd won more completely than I'd ever imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Lexi. "Saw the news. Drinks tonight to celebrate?" I looked at my parents' house, at the neighborhood where I'd grown up, at the sunrise painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Rain check," I texted back. "I think I'm going to take a break from excitement for a while." I went inside to help my mother make breakfast, listening to her chatter about the garden and my father's plans for retirement. Normal conversation about normal things, the kind of life I'd almost forgotten was possible. Serene had taught me a lot about revenge, about planning, about never underestimating an opponent. But she'd also taught me something else, that winning isn't worth much if you lose yourself in the process. I'd won our war completely and decisively. Now it was time to figure out how to win at peace.